I'm Tanya. The gavel struck, sharp and final. The judge's words echoed in the courtroom. Permanent custody shall be granted to Mrs. Tanya. The father may apply for supervised visitation after completing an approved course of therapy. Contact between Mrs. Diaz and the minor child is prohibited until further evaluation. This court is adjourned. I didn't move right away. Relief spread slowly, like warmth returning to frozen hands. When I finally stood, my son, Ethan, approached, stopping a few feet away. I'm sorry, he said softly. I let everything slip through my fingers. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to hear that. I nodded, because that was all I could offer. Sorry didn't undo the choices he'd made, but it mattered that he said it. Outside, the sky had cleared. Sunlight spilled across the courthouse steps, bright and startling after the weight of the morning. I walked to my car with a steadiness I hadn't felt in a long time. As I drove home, my mind drifted back to that fateful day at the airport. My 7-year-old granddaughter, Lily, was sitting alone in the middle of JFK Airport. I spotted her long before she saw me. She was small and stiff, clutching a tattered pink backpack as if it were the only thing keeping her anchored to the ground. People rushed past her in hurried waves, too busy and indifferent to notice the terrified child someone had chosen to discard. As I walked toward her, my phone buzzed again in my coat pocket. I didn't need to look. I already knew what message was glowing on the screen. I'd read it a dozen times on the drive here, each time feeling a new layer of disbelief peel away, replaced by something colder, sharper, more dangerous. We've decided she stays with you. Don't contact us during our trip. That was all my daughter-in-law, Isabella, wrote. No explanation, no apology, no humanity. When Lily finally lifted her eyes to mine, there was no relief in them, just confusion, fear, and something that nearly broke me, resignation. As if this wasn't the first time she'd been left behind. Right then, before I even touched her shoulder, I realized something was terribly wrong. And whoever had done this to her had no idea what kind of war they'd just started. Lily didn't say a word on the drive home. She sat in the back seat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, her thin shoulders pulled inward as if she were trying to disappear into the fabric of the seat. Every few minutes I caught her eyes in the rearview mirror. She always looked away first. I didn't tell her everything would be okay because she'd been lied to enough for one day. So I just drove, slow and steady, letting the silence settle the way a doctor might let a wound breathe before touching it. When we finally pulled into my driveway, she hesitated before opening the car door. It was as if she needed permission to step inside my home. I walked around and opened the door for her. She flinched, not away from me, but as though she wasn't sure what any sudden movement would bring. I kept my voice soft, steady, controlled. You're safe here, sweetheart, I said. Let's go inside. She followed me in with small, careful steps. The house was warm from the heater I'd left running earlier, but she rubbed her arms as though she couldn't feel any of it. I set her backpack on the kitchen table and asked if she wanted something hot to drink. She nodded, only once, and sat politely on the edge of a chair like a guest who was afraid to overstay her welcome. I made cocoa the way Isabella used to. Warm milk, a pinch of cinnamon, a bit of sugar. When I set the mug in front of her, she whispered thank you in a voice so faint I almost missed it. She sipped slowly, watching the steam rise as though she were afraid even the warmth might disappear if she held it too tightly. That was when I noticed the shoes. The soles were worn nearly flat. The backs frayed where they rubbed against her heels. The laces didn't match, one black, one brown. Her coat was too thin for New York in early winter. The zipper stuck halfway up. And when she pushed her sleeves back, I saw faint indentations around her wrists, marks from wearing elastic cuffs that were far too tight. None of this was new. That much I understood. This had been building for a long time. Lily, I said gently, were you alone at the airport the whole time? She didn't speak at first. Her fingers curled around the mug as if it were a lifeline. When she finally lifted her eyes, there was a flicker of shame in them that no child should ever know. I waited, she whispered. I wasn't supposed to cry. Those 5 words hit me harder than anything Isabella's text had said. Lily had been trained, conditioned, to believe her own tears were an inconvenience. I forced myself to stay composed. Rage wouldn't help her. But it sat in my throat like a stone. You didn't do anything wrong, I told her. She nodded again, but the gesture didn't carry belief, only habit. I tucked her into the guest room that night. She curled around a small stuffed rabbit, one ear missing, the fur matted from years of clutching. I stayed at the doorway long after she fell asleep, watching her breathing steady out, listening to the small sounds of a child finally resting in safety. When I stepped back into the hallway, the house felt different, larger, somehow quieter, but not empty. More like it was holding its breath along with me. I reached for my phone then, not out of panic, but purpose. Because the moment Lily whispered that she wasn't supposed to cry, I understood something with absolute clarity. Tomorrow, I would start digging. And when I did, I knew I wouldn't like what I found. The next morning began with a gray sky and the quiet kind of cold that seeps under the door before the sun finds its way up. I heard Lily moving in the guest room, small, careful movements, the kind children make when they're afraid of waking the wrong adult. I let her take her time. When she finally stepped into the hallway, she was already dressed in the same clothes she'd worn the day before, smoothing the wrinkles as though that mattered more than comfort. Good morning, I said. She hesitated before answering, testing the air like someone approaching an unpredictable animal. Good morning. I made pancakes even though I hadn't cooked breakfast for a child in years. She watched every step as if waiting for permission to speak. So I kept my voice steady and warm, giving her space to settle. When I placed the plate in front of her, she murmured thank you, barely audible, but a little stronger than the night before. Those small changes mattered. At 9 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Lily stiffened, her fork freezing halfway to her mouth. I reassured her with a touch to her shoulder before opening the door for Mr. Thompson, a family lawyer I trusted. He stepped inside wearing his usual suit and the calm expression of someone who's seen the worst of family disputes and still believes in justice. This is Lily, I said softly. He gave her a gentle smile, the kind that didn't demand anything. Hello, young lady. She nodded without speaking, then retreated to the living room where the morning news played at low volume. I watched her for a moment, her small frame tucked into the corner of the couch, and felt something settle heavily in my chest. Mr. Thompson and I sat at the dining table. I told him everything, the text, the airport, the worn clothes, the way Lily flinched when spoken to. I showed him the pictures I'd taken of her shoes and coat, the timestamps on Isabella's message, the call log proving no one had attempted to reach me before abandoning the child. He listened with the steady patience of a man who'd spent a lifetime navigating the ugliest corners of domestic life. When I finished, he removed his glasses and folded his hands in front of him. Tanya, he said, this isn't an oversight. It's a pattern, and it's serious. I felt that truth settle deeper than bone. We need to act today, he continued. Take her to a pediatrician for an immediate evaluation. Document everything. And whatever Ethan or Isabella send you from this point forward, do not respond. I breathed in slowly, letting his words steady me. There was clarity in them, a direction I desperately needed. Before he left, he leaned closer. You understand this may tear the relationship with your son beyond repair. I glanced toward the living room where Lily sat hugging her knees, eyes fixed on the TV but not truly watching. There's nothing left to tear, I said. Once Mr. Thompson was gone, I took Lily to the clinic. The pediatrician, Dr. Green, was gentle with her, asking questions in a soft voice, letting Lily answer only when she felt safe. I stepped out during part of the exam, standing in the hallway staring at a poster about childhood anxiety, my stomach tightening with each muffled sound from behind the door. When Dr. Green invited me back in, her expression told me everything before she spoke. She's physically healthy, she said carefully, but emotionally, she's been holding far too much for far too long. Lily looked at her hands, shoulders drawn inward again. I reached for her, letting my fingers rest lightly over hers. We'll take it one step at a time, I told her. And I meant it. But as we walked out into the cold morning air, I felt the shift, small, unmistakable, dangerous. The truth was no longer hiding in shadows. Part of it had already stepped into the light, and I knew the rest was coming. The days that followed felt strangely suspended, as if the world were holding its breath while I gathered the pieces of a story no child should ever be part of. Lily moved through my home like a quiet shadow, polite, careful, grateful for every smallest gesture. She clung to routine the way someone clings to a railing in a storm. Breakfast at 8 o'clock, homework after school, lights out at 9 o'clock. She watched my reactions closely, as though the wrong question or wrong expression might shift the ground beneath her feet. But cracks kept surfacing. One evening when I told her she could leave her toys on the living room rug because we'd clean together later, she jerked upright and shook her head quickly, panic filling her eyes. I can't, she whispered. Mess makes her angry. Her I didn't need to ask who. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat in the dim light of the kitchen with a cup of tea that had long gone cold. My phone buzzed on the table, Ethan's name lighting up the screen again. I let it ring. The second time, I turned the phone face down. I knew what he would say anyway, that I misunderstood, that Lily was dramatic, that Isabella had been under pressure, that he was trying his best. None of it mattered. Not anymore. The next morning, I took Lily for a walk around Central Park. The air was crisp, the kind that wakes your lungs and clears your mind whether you want it to or not. Lily held my hand loosely, the way a child does when they want comfort but aren't sure if they're allowed to want it. When we reached the swings, a young woman approached us hesitantly. She wore a thick sweater, her hair tied back in a messy ponytail, her eyes wide with recognition. Mrs. Tanya? She asked. I nodded. My name is Ava. Ava Miller. She swallowed hard. I used to babysit for Ethan and Isabella. I felt Lily's hand tighten in mine, her fingers curling into my palm. Ava noticed the movement and softened her voice. I didn't know how to reach you. But when I heard what happened at the airport, I had to find you. She told me things I already suspected but still wasn't prepared to hear. The endless punishments, the locked bedroom door, Lily being made to eat alone because she slowed down the boys, the way Isabella insisted that Ethan not intervene when Lily cried, calling it manipulation. Ava's voice trembled as she spoke, guilt filling every pause. I quit, she said finally. I told myself it wasn't my place, but I should have said something sooner. I'm sorry. Lily leaned into my side, small and silent. I wrapped an arm around her and kept my eyes steady on Ava. You're saying it now, I told her. And that matters. Ava nodded, relief softening her shoulders. I wrote everything down. Dates, incidents, even some recordings. If you need them, I want to help. There it was, proof, clear and undeniable, the kind that couldn't be brushed aside or twisted into excuses. That afternoon, I called Mr. Thompson. He listened quietly, then let out a breath that sounded like both disbelief and grim validation. This changes everything, he said. Tanya, with this, plus the doctor's report, plus the abandonment, were ready to petition for emergency custody. The words settled over me like a weight I was finally strong enough to carry. When I hung up and turned toward the living room, Lily was sitting cross-legged on the rug, coloring a picture of a house with a garden. She looked up at me with a hesitant smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes but was still more than she'd managed days ago. I sat beside her, feeling the warmth of the room wrap around us both. The storm was coming, louder, fiercer, impossible to avoid, but for the first time, I didn't feel afraid. Because now, I wasn't fighting shadows. I had truth on my side, and soon, so would Lily. The hearing for temporary custody took place on a rainy Thursday morning. The courthouse steps were blurred into muted gray streaks. I had dressed carefully, choosing a simple black suit and tying my hair back, not to appear younger or stronger, but to show the judge I was steady, someone who could hold a child's world together when everyone else had let it fall apart. Lily stayed home with my sister, Rose. She didn't ask where I was going, though her eyes followed me until the door closed. Children know when a day is heavier than others. Inside the courtroom, the lights were too bright, and the air carried that sterile government chill. Ethan sat on the opposite bench, his shoulders hunched, his eyes rimmed red. He looked everywhere but at me. Isabella sat beside him, rigid, her arms crossed tightly, her expression a mix of irritation and fear. Maybe she wasn't expecting things to reach this point. Maybe she thought abandoning a child was something that could be smoothed over with pretty words and charm. When the judge entered, the room shifted. Mr. Thompson presented everything, Dr. Green's evaluation, the photos of Lily's clothes, the screenshots of Isabella's message, Ava's written testimony. Each piece landed with a quiet finality, like stones placed carefully onto a scale already tipping in my favor. Ethan's attorney tried to salvage what she could. She spoke of misunderstandings, of a family under stress, of a father who loved his daughter but had made an unfortunate misjudgment. But each time she spoke, the judge's expression grew colder, more incredulous, as though he couldn't believe he was hearing someone defend the indefensible. When it was Ethan's turn to speak, he finally looked at me. His voice shook. He said he never meant to hurt Lily. He said he thought I would arrive sooner. He said he didn't think she'd be alone for long. But each word was a reminder that he had thought more about convenience than the fear of a 7-year-old girl sitting abandoned in one of the busiest airports in the country. Then came Isabella's turn. Her voice was firm, practiced, carefully polished. She insisted Lily had behavioral issues. She insisted she'd only wanted a peaceful vacation. She insisted I'd always tried to undermine her authority. The judge interrupted her. You left a minor child alone in a public airport. For 40 minutes, you did not check that she was safely transferred to her guardian. That is not an oversight. That is neglect. Isabella's mouth snapped shut. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in her eyes. The ruling came quickly. Temporary custody granted to me. Supervised visits for Ethan. No contact whatsoever for Isabella. As the gavel struck, Ethan collapsed into his seat, covering his face with both hands. Isabella stood frozen, as though the judge had spoken in a language she didn't understand. I walked out without looking back. The rain had stopped, leaving the courthouse steps slick and shining under a pale sky. When I reached my car, my hands trembled, not from fear, but release. For the first time in months, the weight on my chest eased, replaced with something steady, fierce, and unshakable. When I arrived home, Lily ran to me, her hair loose from an afternoon of playing. She hugged me with both arms, squeezing without letting go. I held her tightly, breathing in the warmth of a child finally beginning to feel safe. We spent the next weeks building something that resembled a life. Therapy sessions, new routines, laughter returning in small and fragile bursts. Lily started drawing again, pictures of gardens and houses and sunlight instead of empty rooms and dark corners. But beneath all of that, I knew what still waited ahead. The final hearing, the one that would decide everything. And this time, I was ready to finish what they had started. The day of the final hearing dawned with a pale, quiet light, the kind that slips across your living room floor before you've fully woken. I sat at the table with a cup of coffee growing cold between my hands, trying to steady myself. Lily padded into the kitchen in her socks, her hair tousled from sleep. She didn't ask where I was going, but she leaned against my side for a moment, as if she needed to anchor herself before the day began. "You'll come back?" she whispered. I will, I said, brushing her cheek. And when I do, we'll be all right. She nodded. But I saw the fear she hadn't learned to hide yet. I hugged her tightly before Rose took her upstairs to get ready for school. There was nothing more I could say without risking tears neither of us needed that morning. The courthouse was crowded but hushed, as if everyone there understood that these rooms decided the futures of people who hadn't asked for their lives to be put on trial. Ethan and Isabella were already seated with their attorneys. Ethan looked worn, smaller somehow. Isabella's expression was carefully